Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of the Hero Realms review, and in this part we're going to talk about the campaign expansion, the Ruin of Thandar, which turns, as I said, the Hero Realms competitive deck builder into a cooperative game. And in this game we're going to be using some of these character packs because the active players will be using these heroes to defeat the evil enemies. So let's set up a game, explain how it plays, and afterwards we will share our thoughts. In part 1 of the Hero Realms video, which you can check if you check the eye icon in the top of the video here, we've talked about the base game, how to set it up and how to play it competitively. And you can also use 5 additional character packs that you can buy separately to change the game a bit. So there's 5 classes. You've got the cleric, the wizard, the ranger, the thief, and the fighter. And each of these decks comes with a nice fighter card that shows you the total amount of health, which is different for each class. There's a female and a male version of each in the artwork, which is really nice as well. You get a special your own health tracker with nice art on it as well. So that's a nice touch. And then you get some new cards. So in this case you get 2 cards which are your special abilities. So you've got 2 fighter abilities, and these stay in play, and the rules are explained on the back here, as you can see. And these will stay in play for the entire game, so they give you an extra ability. This is a one-time ability because you need to discard it to be able to use it. And this one needs 2 gold, for example, and it needs to be spent to do 2 damage. So those are nice and extra abilities, and each character has different abilities. And you also get a new starter deck. So in contrary to the base game, where you get 7 gold and the ruby and all kinds of stuff, you get a specialized deck here, which is indicated by the fighter icons, in this case in the top. So you can see whose deck this is easily. So in this case the fighter gets some gold, he gets a ruby, but he also gets a long sword, which is more powerful than the standard dagger. He gets a shield bearer, who is a champion, so he stays in place and gives you a protection of 3, and he gets a throwing axe. So those are, specialized decks basically. So you can choose to play with those competitively, and there's 5 different ones, like I said, and they all have a different starting deck, and they all have different health that they start out with. So they all work differently, and they're a lot of fun to explore and to try out and see how they play against each other. So yeah, those are the 5 character packs. Let's set up the Ruin of Thandar expansion. In the Ruin of Thandar, you set up the game exactly like you would in a regular Hero Realms game by shuffling the deck, setting aside the fire gems, and turning over 5 cards in the market. Now in addition, instead of starting out with the regular player starting decks, the players pick one of the 5 class decks that they wish to play, and they use those, and that will be your deck. Now the expansion comes with new abilities and skills for these 5 classes that you can use, and at some point during the game, after you finish a encounter, you can pick some of those cards, and you start out with the ones that are already in your deck. So in this case these replace the cards. So I've got my inventory, my skill, and my ability, which in this case there's 2 abilities here which had the explanation on the back, and the Ruin of Thandar comes with these 2. So you got the shoulder bash and the crushing blow, which replace these 2. So you just take these one out of the game, you don't need them anymore unless you want to read this, and then you take these 2 and you put them on the campaign side, because they are double-sided. One is the regular skill and one is the campaign skill, the same for the ability cards. Those go into your inventory and they stay in play. This one stays in play until you use it, of course, and this one can be used over and over again. And the rest of that deck is still your standard, in this case, fighter starting deck. And as always, you take that starter deck, you shuffle the cards, and you start out with 5 cards in your hand, and the rest is your drawing deck. So this is your starting hand. And once everybody has done that, you set up the master, which is the AI for the bad guy in this case. And the Ruins of Thandar comes with a pack of cards, and you will encounter some of these during the game. So the first one is the Enthralled Regulars. Over here, that is the first encounter you have. It's basically a bar fight in which some of the patrons will start to attack you. And you just put the other ones aside for now and put this somewhere on the table. Now the master, the AI, also takes up a seat at the table. So make sure when you're seated, somewhere that character also takes up a seat. So people will be sitting next to the master. And this is important because sometimes you can help people that are sitting next to you. And if you're sitting next to the master, then you only have one person sitting next to you, which is illustrated in this graphic here. Now with 2 players, that doesn't matter, of course, but with 3, 4, or 5 players, you see that this player is only sitting next to that one, this one sits next to these 2, this one next to these 2, and this one only next to that player, whereas the master sits next to everybody. This is important, so choose where you're setting up the master on the table. And then you need to prepare the master's deck. First of all, I just use one of these leftover health tracking cards from the base game to keep track of the master's health. You can also use dice if you wish. And the master's deck always consists of several cards. You have these S cards indicated with an S. These are setting cards, and these will always be in the master's deck. So we have those. And then there's cards with numbers in the bottom. So for example, here is the number 1. So these are all cards with the number 1. And this means these are the cards for the first encounter. And there's also cards for the second and the third encounter, which you will put aside for now. And finally, there are 5 mastery cards with this symbol on it and an M in the bottom left. And there's 5 different ones of those as well. All of those cards are used to create the master's deck, but depending on the number of players, you're going to remove some of those setting cards. If you're playing 4 players, you need to remove 3 of these. For 3 players, you remove 6. For 2 players, you remove 9. And for 1 player, you remove 12 of these cards. So let's say we're playing a 3-player game versus the master, then I need to remove 6 of these cards. So I simply take this deck, I shuffle it, and I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 remove those cards. So I have these left. Next, you take the encounter cards and the setting cards, and you shuffle those together. And then you divide those into 5 more or less equal stacks. 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and any remaining cards you put in the middle stack. Then you take the 5 mastery cards and put them on top of those as well. And then you shuffle those 5 decks, but you keep them separate. And after you shuffle those 5 stacks, you add them on top of each other without shuffling them again. So that means that the 5 mastery cards are more or less evenly divided into the master's deck, and then you place the master's deck next to the master. So then play can commence in turns, so starting with the first player, who is then called the active player, you start with the master as first. So what happens then is on the active player's turn, you turn over one of the cards of the master. You check that card, and the card will have a color in the top left and a description of what it does. So what happens then is that you play that card. First you check the color, and you check the color on the master's card that corresponds with it. and that's the master's ability, and in this case the master gains 2 health. So you add that to his health, so now he's at 52, and then you resolve the card. Now there's different kinds of cards in the deck. There are hazards, events, mastery cards, which we saw, elite minions, and regular minions. So event cards such as these are just simply things that happen. So you read the card and you resolve it, and then it gets discarded. You also have minions, and minions are basically the creatures that master uses to attack you with. And in this case, it's an elite minion that has the guard ability. So elite minions are always placed into the master's area, and they will protect him. So you need to get rid of the guard first. You need to stun him for 5 damage, and then he gets discarded into the discard pile of the master, and only then you can attack the master's hit point again. And whenever you draw a mastery card, such as this, again, you check the color first. You do that with the minions as well, and you just place it on top of the mastery card, of the master's card. And whenever you draw enough mastery cards to match the number of mastery symbols underneath the master's level over here, which is 3 in this case, you flip the master's card over, and now he's level 2, and he gets stronger abilities. So that's bad for the players. So whenever you draw a regular minion, that is not a elite minion, that one gets placed into the active player's zone in his area, and it will attack you instead. Now this one, in this case, this biting imp, does not do damage, but he does of course activate the master's special ability with the green color, so it does 2 damage, and the active player needs to discard a card. And then this gets placed into the active player's area, and the master will then use its ability. In this case, he will expend it to make me discard an item. So this card gets turned over, and if I have an item on my hand, such as this card that says item in the top left here, then I need to discard that. If I have multiple items, I can choose which one to discard, but in this case I will let me see, this is an item too, so I will just discard money because I need to do some damage next. And finally, there are hazard cards such as these. If you draw them, you activate the master's ability first, and whenever it's a white symbol such as this one, you select the master's preferred ability, and that is always the color with the spikes around it, in this case the red one, so it does 3 damage to the active player. And a hazard card also gets placed in the active player's area, and then something just happens. So in this case, your area is blocked off. You may expend one of your champions to clear this hazard. Otherwise, you can't help your player that is sitting next to you. You're basically blocked off. So that gets played in your area as well until you get rid of it. Then at the end of the master's turn, any turned over cards get placed upright again, and then the active player himself can play. So in this case, I already had to discard a couple of cards because of the imp, so you just have 3 cards left, and then I can play my turn normally by, in this case, placing a champion on the table and perhaps doing some damage with these cards. So in this case, I've got 5 damage, and I really want to get rid of this imp here, so I'm dealing him 4 damage. That one gets stunned, and there's no active minions or elite minions in the master's area, so I got 1 point left, and I can deal that damage to the master directly. Then I can also expend one of my champions. So this is a champion, I can expend him and make that shield bearer clear the rubble, get rid of that as well, and then at the end of my turn I prepare this champion again, I discard all my played cards, and I draw back up to 5 new cards. So play continues like that. The next player becomes the active player, draws a card for the master first, resolves the color of the special skill, resolves the card, and then continues playing normally. And that goes on until either the master wins or the players defeat the master by reducing him to 0 health. Whenever a minion of the master attacks a player, there's a certain order you need to take into consideration. So first of all, he will use each of its minions in the active player's area, and then he will use those minions in the master's area, so the elite ones. And then all the damage that those minions do combined will be used to attack the player in a villainous attack. And he first checks if he can destroy or he can stun any of the player's champions. And he checks first which is the champion with the highest value of defense. And if he can defeat that one, then he will. And then you check which is the next one that he can stun and the next one he can't stun. If there's no more champions left and there's still some damage left, then he will do that directly to the player. There's a few new rules for the players as well. For example, if another player is at the table, sitting next to me, and he has this minion in his area, then I can actually attack that minion as well, as long as he's sitting next to me, which is why the seating was so important. So if I have some attack points left and I don't have anything to attack myself, because if there's a minion in my own area, I need to get rid of that one first, because I'm occupied, I'm in combat with that minion. But if I have nothing more left in my own area, then I could possibly spend some cards to attack a minion in one of my neighboring players' areas. Also, whenever I generate health, then I can of course give it to myself, but I can also give it to a nearby player. You can split it up though, so all the health gained from one action or one card needs to go to that player or to yourself. But if you draw multiple cards that have a healing effect, then you can use those cards on whoever you want. Whenever a player is defeated and the master has some cards left in that player's area, all those cards get discarded into the master's discard pile, and the players who were previously seated on the left and right of the defeated player are now considered nearby. And if all players are defeated, then the master wins. Also, something that's important is that all of the master's minions, elite or regular, are considered champions because they, like your own champions, they stay in play. So any card that reads stun a champion, for example, can be used on the master's minions. Whenever you would play a card that forces the opponent, in this case the master, to discard a card, then the active player chooses, looks at the top of the master's draw deck, and then chooses to either discard that card or leave it on top of the pile. Some additional rules you need to know. For example, there is some keywords on the campaign cards that you might encounter. For example, there is the support keyword, which means you can play the card or use the ability during a nearby player's main phase, so out of your own turn. And there's also the focus keyword that says this allows you basically to attack or help other areas even when you have minions in your area. You can also adjust the difficulty of gameplay, so there's a beginner, intermediate, veteran and expert setting of the game, which is explained in the rulebook. If you find it too challenging, you can start at a lower level first. And there's a couple of alternate game modes as well, called No One Left Behind, so nobody may be defeated. As soon as someone dies, then the game is lost. There's also a sudden death game mode where you have to win all 3 encounters within an adventure without losing. So whenever you lose an encounter, you don't get to retry, you just, you lose. Because normally if you lose an encounter, you can simply just retry the encounter until you win. And after you complete each encounter, you will earn rewards, which is specified in the adventure book over here. And the game, the expansion, comes with additional treasure cards for each classes that you can add to your starting personal deck. Or you might earn a character point, which you can later spend to improve your character's starting health or skill or ability cards. So I'll show those cards briefly. So we have the treasure cards over here. So as you can see, they have this treasure box, treasure chest in the top right. And these are cleric items, so there's 4 of those. Then there's ranger treasures, there's the thief, and there's the sorcerer, the wizard, and the fighter. So there's these rewards that you can choose from if you win a campaign and add them to your deck. There are these extra health cards that you can buy for those character points. So in this case you can increase the ranger's health with 8, and later if you spend another point to upgrade your health again, you can flip it over and you get double that. And each of these characters has one of these cards in the deck with a different amount of health. And sometimes you will gain an elixir after defeating a champion or a master in an encounter. And these are 5 different elixirs that give you usually a one-time ability. So in this case, it's a health potion. Basically, you just get rid of it and you gain 5 health. This one does 3 damage. Here it says you can sacrifice a card in your hand if you want to get rid of the cheaper cards in favor of the better ones that are still in your deck. This one basically makes a card cheaper to buy. And this one says draw a card and then discard a card. So those are nice and extra one-off bonuses that you can earn as well. And finally, there are also some group treasure cards that you can get after defeating a boss monster, and then you can use those cards and you basically shuffle them into your market deck, and then during the game they might turn up and then you can buy them for 6 gold. So that is how you're playing the campaign expansion for Hero Realms called the Ruin of Thandar. Let's go to our final thoughts. So our final thoughts on the cooperative version, the Ruin of Thandar, and the player expansions. Let's start with the player's characters first. Erik, what did you think about the character options?
Well, they're all the standards that you know from fantasy video games or fantasy games in general. You have the ranger, the thief, the fighter, the cleric, and the wizard. And really, the only thing that they do is they add a little bit of flavor to your regular games of
Hero Realms.
Exactly.
They just give you a different starting deck, and each class has a different level of hit points that you start out at. So it gives you a little bit of extra flavor. It's fun to try, but they really help with the multiplayer, the cooperative version.
That's the meat and potatoes of this expansion.
Yeah, that's really what you need them for as well, because it makes it a lot more fun and thematic as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So about the adventure, the campaign. So you're playing against a villain in a kind of a story. There's 3 chapters, and they can branch depending on whether you choose a different path or whether you avoid something from happening without spoiling too much. So that is in itself a lot of fun. I think it's very thematic. Again, the artwork also in the expansion is excellent, is on par with the base game. It's just really good. I thought the story was very thematic. We played through the campaign, and well, Erik, what did you think about it?
The campaign is it's just playing a story. It's really well done. It's very short. I would like to have a bit more story.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's something we might get to later on in the review. By the way, this is the base game. These 2 small stacks of cards. The rest, this is all what you get in the expansion.
Exactly.
Just to be clear.
And this deck here is the villain's deck, and you choose different cards depending on which chapter you are playing. So the deck of the villain does change. So in each chapter, you get different encounters. So for example, the first thing you play is a bar brawl. There is a fight in a bar, and you're trying to defeat all the patrons that are fighting, and
yes.
There's something going on there that started the fight, and you're trying to figure out what that is. So basically, you just have to defeat the master player, which is the AI, the evil.
The bad guys.
Doer, yeah. Exactly. And that's very thematic. So you're getting cards that tell you that there's furniture being thrown in the way. And in a multiplayer in a cooperative game, you can help each other, you can help the adjacent players, and when there's furniture in the way, you need to spend time getting that out of the way before you can help each other again. So that's very thematic. There's drunken brawlers that are also attacking you, but a helping player only needs to do half damage to defeat them because they're distracted and they're drunk. So that is also very thematic, and it just gets better the further you go in the story. But like you said, it's only 3 chapters. There's more ways to play it. Like I said, it branches, so you don't have to play it the same way twice.
Mm-hmm. That's true, yeah.
So it does change, even though that it is relatively short. When you replay it, you just choose a different path, and it will be different. There are some things that especially you wanted to say.
Yes, especially in the last playthrough, I got horribly stuck in the game. I was unable to buy new cards, and I couldn't really do anything else. The only thing, I was playing the cleric, so I was really good at healing myself.
Yeah.
But that was basically it. I didn't have the option to buy the cards that I really needed, and I think that can happen to players. It does take the fun out of that particular game that you're playing. But because there are so many cards in the game, I don't think that will happen too often.
No, and it's basically when that happens, and like Erik said, it can happen, that a certain mechanic forces you to discard cards many times, so you can't really get through your deck well, you can't buy the things you want to buy. And so when you're replaying it, you just adapt your strategy. So you could, for example, replay it with a different character, for example, although
Sure.
you do get treasures from defeating, the first encounter. So you get something
built on your starter decks.
Yeah. But when something doesn't work, just retry and just try with a different combination of characters, for example. So, it's not really that big a deal. I found personally it could take the fun out of the particular game you're playing. But
Yes,
next
that's
time,
what I
just,
meant.
yeah, exactly. Just rethink your strategy and hope, of course, that you can draw different cards. Because there's a bit of luck in there, depending on which cards that you draw from the market deck. So that's really all the negativity I found.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, it's really a lot of fun, and it's definitely a recommendation. So that is the Ruin of Thandar, and there will be another expansion, a new standalone that you can combine with the base game campaign deck, basically. So from White Wizard Games, it will be on Kickstarter as well. I will put the link in the description below so you can go and check that out. Highly recommend any of these games. So that is Hero Realms by White Wizard Games. 2 thumbs up. And so that was our review on Hero Realms and the expansion, The Ruin of Thandar by White Wizard Games. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.